Well, good morning. Good to have you. Hope you have continuing to press through the week, doing well, and hope it has been a good week. Had a good service last night. Good time of fellowship prior to with the meal, and always a good time to be able to just relax for a little bit and fellowship. Some appreciate those who are able to be a part of it. I know some are unable to be, and continuing to pray for Lord to accomplish His plan in each of our lives. But had a good time yesterday. Appreciate those who join us online also. I have a tendency sometimes to focus on who isn't there and miss who is there. I'm trying to work on that and just put more of the focus on who is there, and that the Lord would continue to work in the hearts of those that may not be for whatever reason. And it's one thing if we can't, it's another thing if we choose not to. And so always a challenge to keep things in the right perspective. Let's get into our study here this morning, 2 Peter chapter number 2. And keep in mind what we're doing is we're working towards ultimately verse number 9 that says, okay, we've got two classes of people. We have got the wicked and we have got the righteous. And we can rest assured that God is going to maintain the proper distinction between those who are ungodly and those who are godly. Now, the godly may not always seem to be godly. We've got two examples of individuals that are delivered by God. One, we would say, arguably quite a godly individual, Noah. We know at the end of his life, there was a situation that occurs in his tent and with the drunkenness and all of that. So Noah was not perfect. However, what we do understand is that then we come across another individual, a man by the name of Lot. Now, if we were to go back and study in Genesis chapter 13 and Genesis 14, Genesis 19, you'll discover very quickly that the Bible in the Old Testament never once describes him as a righteous individual. In fact, if we were to look at his lifestyle, we would probably conclude that he was anything but righteous. But yet there's a reality behind Lot that the Bible tells us here in 2 Peter chapter number 2, he was a righteous man. When Abraham began pleading and with God that he would spare the city of Sodom and Gomorrah if there were a certain number of righteous individuals, well, it would seem that he believed Lot to be a righteous individual. And so Abraham began all the way back with 50 righteous, and then he went down all the way down to 10. And God even said if there were 10 righteous in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, God would have spared those cities. You would think that with Lot and his family and maybe just a couple of others that we could have come across 10, but we were unable to do so. Lot had chosen to live his life in such a way that the Bible says when he announced to his sons-in-law that there was going to be a judgment from the Lord, that he seemed to them as one that mocked. Lot had lost his testimony by this point in time, and the message that Lot had given was a message that, to be honest with you, unfortunately fell on deaf ears. So let's look at the text here. I think we can learn a lot about this. I think that we can understand the seriousness of our walk with the Lord, the importance of maintaining a daily walk with the Lord, and recognizing, you know what, I'm one step away from an absolute mess. And we're reminded of that here in this text. 2 Peter chapter 2, we're told while God judges those who are wicked, he also, according to verse 9, knows how to deliver the godly. He's delivered Noah back in verse number 5. Now he delivers, verse number 7, a man who is just Lot. Doesn't mean exclusively Lot, it means righteous Lot. God delivered righteous Lot. Again, studying the Old Testament, you would not get that conclusion, but look at what happens to Lot. Lot is described as one who is vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. He is tormented by their lifestyle. It would seem then, from what we can gather, that Lot knew better, but Lot continued to go down that path. He continues into verse 9, for that righteous man dwelling among them in the seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. So here is a man, the Bible describes him as being a righteous man, and he was dwelling among them. He was living in them. If you go back and study in Genesis, you'll discover that Lot made a decision that favored the plains of Sodom and Gomorrah. The Bible tells us that he pitched his tent toward them. And then it stops. And then you find that Lot was one who was taken captive by the battle of the different kings in Genesis chapter 14, and Abraham delivered him from that. I believe that was a warning for Lot. I believe that Lot could very well have chosen to get out of that and recognize this was God trying to get his attention, but Lot didn't do so. The next time that we find Lot, he's actually in chapter 19, sitting in the gate of the city, suggesting that he was a ruler. What a tragedy as you see that downfall and that digression of his life. Be careful of the decisions that you're making. As I shared earlier, we are one step away from making an absolute disaster of things. But nonetheless, this was what Lot did. Well, in that process of time, Lot tormented his soul. He oppressed his soul. There was a sense in which there was a sensitivity as Lot continued in this, that Lot began to lose that spiritual sensitivity. Notice the means by which this was done in verse 8, 2 avenues, seeing and hearing. These really are the gates through which we process information, that what we see and what we listen to. I'm just going to say that we need to be very careful here because there's a lot of things out there that we should not be seeing, and there's a lot that we should not be listening to. And unfortunately, what we find is that our spiritual lives can become very desensitized. The more that we listen to these things, the more that we maybe hear these things or see these things, all of a sudden our minds become desensitized to sin. It's a battle, it's a temptation that we all face, it's a reality that we all need to be conscious of and take special steps to guard against. Oftentimes I see in the lives of believers and even in my own life a cycle in our own lives, a cycle maybe of sin or a cycle of we're doing well and then priorities get out of skewed and before long we're just out of church, we're not where we need to be, we're not studying our Bibles, we're not praying, we're just kind of existing. And things that used to bother us, all of a sudden they don't bother us anymore. And, it's not that big a deal. I can handle it. And the lists go on and on and on. And the point that we see in this text is that Lot is going to serve as an illustration of an individual that just became increasingly desensitized to sin. Again, go back in Genesis 19 and you'll discover that as he became increasingly less desensitized to sin, there's a reality where even as the judgment was about to fall, there was a reality where he had to be dragged out of that city. There was a lot that Lot was losing in that adventure or in that judgment, I should say. And what a tragedy that he had driven his tent stake so deeply there. Well, reminds us, I think, that as believers, it is possible to live a life that unfortunately people would look at and actually be surprised if they found out we were saved, or be surprised if they discovered that we went out to church. That certainly should not be the case, and we need to take conscious steps to avoid that. Now we come to verse 9 and we find kind of what has been the whole point, to which beginning back in verse 4, it has continued. The point of these illustrations are to establish that the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations, out of tests. Could be the ultimate test of whether or not he is going to abandon God. Noah did not. Lot, you would have thought he had, but he did not. Whereas the angels, the world, Sodom and Gomorrah, these are all illustrations where God knows also how to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. This is no joke here. This is a reality, and God does not in any way get these things wrong. He does not get the individuals in the wrong classification. Matthew chapter 7 reminds us that there will be many who will stand in that day and say, Lord, Lord, look at all the things that we have done, and I will profess to them, I never knew you. What a sobering reality that is here for us even today, and there's a sense in which God's going to make these distinctions. But, verse 10, the first part of it, because it so continues, chiefly or above all, he's going to judge those who walk after the flesh in the lust or in the desires of uncleanness and despise government. Uh, doesn't mean that they hate an established form of government, but what it does mean is that they are looking down upon those who are the rulers, the authorities, and so forth. Well, there's a lot, I think, that we can look at here in this text. I think we certainly need to ask ourselves this question: where am I going to spend eternity? That is the most important question that you'll ever answer. But then there's a great lesson for us here in how desensitized to sin have I allowed myself to become. And sometimes we just keep pushing that down, and things that used to bother us no longer bother us. Well, I just changed my view on. I don't have a problem with it, and all that goes on and on and on. It's not about whether or not I have a problem with it. The question that I need to evaluate is, does God have a problem with it? And that has to be the focus, and that has to be the basis by which I make my decisions. Well, I appreciate you being on here this morning. Let's go live a godly life today. Do what is ultimately pleasing in His sight. And I hope that you'll have a great day today. Appreciate you guys being on here. Lord willing, I'll see you back here in the morning. I do hope you have a good day today. And we'll take care of seeing you back here tomorrow. All right. God bless you guys. Appreciate you.